You Booked It, episode 167. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining me today on You Booked It, the #1 podcast where you learn how to create a successful entertainment career. Every episode is a masterclass on how to move your career forward. Do you want to take your career to the next level? As a listener of this podcast, I am offering you the opportunity to work one-on-one with me to build the foundation of what you need to create a successful career in today's world. Regardless if you're starting out or you've been doing this a while, I've got you covered. Look, when I entered this industry, I went to the #1 school in the USA for musical theater, graduated with an insane skill set, and zero clue about how to actually make my skills a career. I lost years of momentum because of it. Do not let this happen to you. That's why I created this podcast. That's why I'm making you this offer to coach with me. If you're interested, simply tap the link in the description of this episode and let's chat. Okay, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Bridgette Cooper. Are you ready for this, Bree?
I am absolutely ready for this. I am over the moon excited.
Yes. Bree is an award-winning classical singer, actress, recording artist, and owner of 728 Productions, a performing and creative media arts and lifestyle brand. She is also the host of the critically acclaimed podcast and TV series HARBOUR for the Arts, formerly known as Operaluscious, and Cooper and Company podcast. In 2018 and 2020, Bree ran for United States Congress with a platform that included the importance of the arts in the global economy. Honored with being named 25 Women Changing the World by Conversations magazine, Bree is on a mission to keep the classical arts, including opera, relevant. Bree, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, fill in the gaps, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry?
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me on your show, Dane. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be part of your amazing podcast. You've done such great work with promoting the arts. I think it's wonderful, and I hope you get everything that you want and more out of the work that you do and the commitment to the arts that you have. So, as for me, I started singing when I was about 12 years old in junior high. And I was like a late bloomer, but my music teacher at the time, she happened to hear me sing and she reached out to my parents. She ended up giving me a solo and she's at one of the school concerts. And she said, I think you need to come hear her. She has a very unique voice. And long story short, they went to hear me. They thought, oh, wow, Bridgette, you should really think about a career in music. You have such a beautiful voice. It takes a lot of work. And they were just my biggest supporters. My music teacher was such a big support. When it came to high school, they helped me start the audition process. And I learned a lot of different arias. And I sang my first opera when I was in eighth grade in junior high. And so it was a moment that I will never forget. And I hold the opera Carmen very dear to my heart because that was the first opera that I ever did in junior high. Long story short, I went on to work and well, do my bachelor's at East Carolina University, where I majored in vocal performance. And I won a lot of awards there for singing. And it was something that I really loved doing. It was very difficult for me because everyone else had started music when they were like 3 or 4, but I was starting music and seriously studying music at the age of 16 when I started college. So I was really behind. It was really hard work for me. People think that they hear, oh, you're a musician or you're an opera singer, you just learn to sing, but it's so much more than that, as you know, because you started out as a classical singer yourself. And so I had to work really hard to not only pass like theory and sight singing classes, but I had to work really hard to learn the skills that were needed to become a successful classical singer, which is what I really wanted to aspire to. And singers like Marian Anderson hearing stories from my mom about how she went to the concert in 1939, that inspired me and stuck with me. And I just always wanted to just aspire to have that kind of stage presence. And after I finished college, I ended up going on to live in New York. I studied with a wonderful voice teacher there, did a lot of auditions. I booked my first international tour. And then I went on to study music again at the American Institute of Musical Studies in Austria. After that, I started with the Broadway national tour of Showboat. So I started touring, and my life was on the road for probably 10, 15 years. And I just kind of kept going. And then it wasn't until I decided I really needed to settle down and I wanted to do more with just giving back. And I received a grant to teach opera to underserved areas in the Washington, D.C. area. And it was like a $10,000 grant. It was a great experience for a lot of kids that would never have probably thought about being entertained or in music as far as opera is concerned or singing opera. And some of the children were actually in gangs, and for them to, especially the young men, for them to come around and start really enjoying Mozart. And I would always tell them, you don't have to love it, but I want you to be able to be in a conversation and say, oh, I know that opera, or I know Mozart. I don't really care for this opera, or I like this opera because of. So that was my biggest goal for them. And I think just leaving it there where they felt like they had a lot of control in deciding whether it was for them opened up a whole new just a whole new idea of what it means to be engaged in the arts. And so I got a lot of critical acclaim for that. I won New Teacher of the Year, Outstanding Teacher of the Year. And then moving forward, just continuing with my solo career, like you said, I was 25 Women Changing the World by Conversations magazine. I won an alumni award. I was part of NASDAQ's in Ignite Your Ambition campaign. And I've won several awards of singing, the Paul Robeson National Vocal Competition, Marjorie Lawrence International Competition, the Bel Canto Competition, the YWCA Studio Club Competition. And so it's just been a really expansive career for sure. It's hard work. I've sung with a variety of different opera companies. I've done television. And like you mentioned, my production company is something I started in 2013 with the aspiration of bringing more performing and creative arts to the mainstream platform, and not in a way where it just insults someone's intelligence. I just think that we can all learn about other languages. We can all learn about opera without this kind of gimmicky thing that we've seen over the past, 5 and 6 years. And I'm sure it's to get people in the houses. But then, as we were talking about it earlier, the other problem is that it's not affordable. And so, what I want to do, and definitely what I've been doing with the production company, is highlighting those companies that are in our backyards that don't get enough recognition, those opera companies that hire wonderful singers with international experience. And they are putting on operas and making it affordable for families to go to. So it started out with a blog talk radio show, and then it went on to a television show, which aired in New York, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Los Angeles. And probably over this past year, I had so many different people reach out to me, expressing their interest in what I was talking about with performing arts. And then I realized the audience grew to include people that were in the performing arts and the creative arts and all sorts of classical, serious performing artists. I mean, people that have trained and work hard. I mean, all artists work hard, but I think it's a different level when you actually commit to your craft and you spend years and years paying for the education in whatever means, either that's workshops or classes. So that's what I definitely wanted to do, and be more inclusive for the performing arts and the creative arts in general. In 2018 and 2020, I actually ran for United States Congress, and I included on my platform the positive impact of the arts in the global economy, in the national and global economy. So that was something that very important to me because as the arts is getting cut in budgets across the country in the United States. So it was important for me to at least have a platform, start talking to people that can make the decisions, be part of making those decisions. And I had a really strong showing. That's just a little bit about me.
Brilliant. I love your journey, love your story, and I am amazed at how much of an advocate you are for the arts. It's so amazing, so inspiring. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And let's dig into this first section here. And Bree, look, I'm a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
Oh, let me think about that. Let's see. My favorite quote, there is one that I really love, and it's one that I heard recently, actually. It's music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and a life to everything. And it's by Plato, which I've probably heard over the years, but it just took on even more meaning, especially during this pandemic and how much time everyone has had to just reflect on where they are in the arts, what their commitment, and recommit themselves as artists. So that's one of my favorite quotes.
Oh, that's really good. I don't think that one has been on the show yet. Really like that quote.
Oh, thank you.
And let's move on to this next section here. And Bree, of course, you're an entertainer. I'm an entertainer. And I think that you'd agree that this industry can be one of the most subjective, brutally honest, personally emotional industries in existence. And you know as well as I that in order to create and have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, yeah, there's an outrageous amount of fun and excitement doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career, and how did you come out the other side better because of it?
Oh, I think for me, I think it's one of the basic ones of trying to balance everything. And when you realize that you go through this audition process, you get rejected, but then you realize, oh my goodness, my career is in my own hands.
Hmm.
And you can't be an artist that goes to an audition and everything relies and is hinging upon one person saying, "You're fabulous. You're great. We're going to hire you," because you get hired. And then after that, you might not be the flavor of the month anymore. You might not get another job. So, one of the difficult things I think for me has always been making sure I have educated myself with how to start my own business, be an arts advocate, be an entrepreneur in the arts, which is why I decided to get my MBA. So I really had an understanding about business. And I think that's what has helped me stay afloat. But the other part of it is just not having as much access to things in general. We are all talking about social justice now, what that looks like being a classical singer of color, which I've never really thought too much about. But having those conversations now and then just realizing that I've always felt like I've had to do my own thing. I have never been able to rely on one thing, one agent, one manager, one opportunity. And I think that's how I have had to keep moving myself forward, which the hard part is that you don't get enough validity or, who you are as an artist sometimes it doesn't seem valid because there are not enough people that are following you on Twitter or following you on social media, but yet you're working your behind off behind the scenes. I'm in the studio once a month doing CDs and EPs and creating these and doing the podcast and having my production company and working on plays and all of that. And sometimes if you can't find it in the budget to pay for a PR person, it's a bit disheartening when you feel like, oh, wow, I put all this effort into stuff and people don't even know that I'm here. So that's the part that is still really difficult, but it's also the part that I'm glad that I realized long before the pandemic, years before the pandemic, that what you do as an artist is up to you. And that you have to be able to have something that's yours, that you can grow, that you can water over time, so that when the phone stops ringing, because it will, you still have your thing that can create income for you, that can create some sort of happiness for you in this field where it's just a ton of rejection. But because of the gift and the accountability you have to share your gift, it's not a matter of, oh, I'll just do something else. It's just not even in your vocabulary. All artists understand that. But I think that's the biggest thing, making sure you have something that's yours, no matter what it is. Even if you're a musician, and let's say you have a talent outside of music that has to do with maybe organizing, it is so important to build a business organizing. Or I spoke with my other podcast, I spoke with a singer, classical singer, who is also an artist, a visual artist. And she's created her own business just doing a lot of opera associated gifts and graphic arts and prints all about opera. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so she's been able to make a nice little living for herself outside of the opera when the phones stop ringing or when they're not ringing enough. So I think that's how I came out on the other side, knowing early that I'm always going to have something going. And I want other artists to realize that, you know what, it might be a 9 to 5 job that has to keep you going. That's okay. You just have to make sure that you can do what you need to do as an artist.
For sure. I'm so glad that you talked about that and the that crossover that us as artists have with entrepreneurship. In my view, they are almost one and the same. We are
Mhm.
in many ways the product or service being sold. And just if you sell Rubik's cubes, you need to find that market within the world that wants them. And
Correct.
not only does it have the parallel there, but I think a lot of entertainers and entertainment professionals, we don't give ourselves enough credit for all of the attributes that we have that make entrepreneurialism such a natural thing to step into. We are already willing to work really, really hard on something very specifically with before we even see any direct income payoff. We're already usually, I should say, open to taking on a bit more risk, right? And we also have the confidence to find our markets. So we really have all of this stuff ready to go. I think you just have to switch it in your mind to say, yeah, I can also be an entrepreneur. Because I am an entrepreneur and I can actually take my skill set and monetize it or find a way to monetize it in a way that isn't simply waiting for someone to give you a contract.
Yes, completely agree with that. And that is so important. That is something that I think all artists need to realize. And I think a lot of it has to do with this. I get in this conversation a lot with other people, but when I was coming up, I was going through college, and you get let's say you finish college and you move to New York. The conversation was always, what else do you do? You only sing, right? And as if to say, if you did not only sing, then it made you less of a performer. And I find that happening a lot, and it's happening less now because people are realizing and understanding that you need multiple streams of income. And I think what has to happen is that there has to be less shame in understanding that it's no fun being a starving artist. But if you believe in a higher power, I do believe that God has given all of us a skill and a gift that all we need to be able to create a living for ourselves. Like I said earlier, if you are a singer, that yes, that is one way. But then you look at, oh, wow, I'm also great at organizing. If you think about it, most musicians, if you went to school for music, I mean, we train like athletes, and people don't even realize the self reliance you have to have. You have to be self motivated, you have to
Mm.
sacrifice. A lot of classical singers are trained like athletes and you have the mindset of an athlete. So you have to really think about how else are you going to make a living? And I think it's just really important that we remove the shame from being a performing or creative artist. And if anyone has ever read the book Big Magic, and it is by, I want to say it's Elizabeth Gilbert, the woman that wrote Eat, Love, Pray. She talks about that and the importance of no matter if you have to have five full-time jobs, which is always impossible, a lot of full-time job, maybe a few part-time jobs, whatever it is that allows you to continue your path of creating. In our case, it's music. In your wife's case, I know it's dance, and then raising a family as well. Whatever that means, and to get rid of the shame, because at the end of the day, all you want to do is keep performing. And there's nothing better than to be able to perform and share your gift and be able to uplift others through the arts. But the only way you can do that is if you're able to support yourself. And we have to get rid of the shame. It's great that honestly, during the pandemic, I started a company and I also do contracting with the government. And I'm able to support myself with that. And when a lot of people were losing their jobs, I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this until something else opens up. I have my own production company, which I still am working away at. I create my CDs and EPs and I self publish them. So those are all the things that I think are really important. And it just comes down to a matter of not shaming performing artists or thinking less of a performing artist because they do other things. And like you said, we're multifaceted. If you've trained in the performing arts, you are pretty much a good organizer, or you're pretty much really great at taking direction, which means, you know what? You could train people. There are corporations that will pay people so much money just to train and train their employees. And it's just a matter of understanding how that company works. And then you put together your portfolio and you do that. And so I think that's really important, just getting rid of the shame that performing artists have about making money outside of music.
Yeah, great. I really love your insight on that. Thank you so much for all of that. And let's move on to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living, or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing as an entertainer. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for me, I've always been pretty good about maintaining a career and then being able to be hired for different projects. I also am one to not be, someone would say, oh, I need a solo in the chorus. I am one to figure out how things work behind the scenes before putting a lot of pressure on myself. So I would target an opera company and I'm like, gosh, I really want to be like such and such singer. How can I be like that? Or find a way, I want to see how the company works because I definitely would want to be a solo singer there. So we have the Washington National Opera. And I said, okay, wow, I would love to sing because Domingo at the time, he was the artistic director. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to sing with him. And I put it in my mind. I found out when their auditions were, and they had chorus auditions because at the time I didn't have a manager. So I was, and they're probably not even going to want to hear soloists, which they do all the time. But usually they'll listen to a lot of singers with managers first or get feedback from them. So I knew that was part of the game as well. So I went ahead and auditioned for the chorus, and I thought, if I can just get in the chorus and figure out how all of this, like what the dynamics are behind the scenes, I'll know how to prepare for the audition for a principal role. I'll know the people will know me. And so I went in there and I went to the audition. I got the job. I was in the chorus. And luckily, I did the same thing with Lyric Opera Chicago, which is how I ended up doing Amistad. But the choir master there, he was so great, Donald Palumbo, who's now at the Met. And he was so great at making sure you had your music down, memorized. He would walk through the chorus and listen to who had the part, who didn't have the part. You get a little note if you were just not up to par with memorizing your music. So I remember thinking that, and I was just like, oh, I've got to be off book. I've got to be off book quickly. So the conductor at the National Opera, he would pretty much, it was written in the contract that you basically do not have to have your music memorized outside of the rehearsal time. So whatever you learn in rehearsal, that's how the music was supposed to be learned. You couldn't expect singers who had full-time jobs and then sang in the chorus to learn the music outside of that. So I think that was the flow of how things were, which can make you a lazy singer. And there were lots of great singers there. Okay. So here we are, first rehearsal, and the conductor goes over, I don't know, 20 measures. And I'm singing, I do it. And then I said, you know what, let me close this book. So I memorized it after 2 run throughs with the 20 measures, and I would close my book. And he would see I closed my book. I would always make sure I was sitting in the front row. I was
Yeah.
just like, and I would never say anything too much to anybody. I was always very friendly, but very professional. And he would never say anything, but I knew he'd notice because I'm like, I'm going to close my book every single time I memorize a line. So I kept doing this. And the show is now time for rehearsals. Placido Domingo is there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to see how he works. And I'm so excited. And this is just me being in the chorus, like fangirl it out. But the pressure was off. Don't ever underestimate that because you have to really know yourself. So I was like, okay, the pressure is off, but yet people are, watching, and I know they're going to watch me if I just stay on my toes. And it worked. So we do the whole opera, and I think it was like the last dress rehearsal. And I get this note from Domingo, and then at the time it was Ed Purrington. And the stage manager says, "Oh, they want to see you at the break." And I was like,
Oh.
"What? Oh my God, here we go. What happened?" And I was like, "Okay, okay, sure." So I didn't know. I was like, I couldn't have done anything wrong. I don't talk to people. I'm just like, "Hi, okay, bye." So here I am in the audience, and of course, everybody's looking because now I have the executive director and the artistic director sitting there in the audience talking to me while everybody else is in rehearsal. They asked me, they said, "Bridgette, I've heard you're doing a really great job with memorizing music and you're so committed to it. There is an opera that we're doing next season." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "Do you know what it is?" And I said, "I'm pretty familiar with it. Is it whatever, Falstaff or something?" And he said, "No, we decided to add the Crucible." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm familiar with the story. I'm not familiar with the opera." And he said, "I'm going to get you the opera. And would you be interested in auditioning for the lead role?"
Wow.
Tituba. And I was like, "What?" I just looked at him. I said, "Of course, yes." And he said, "Don't worry." He says, "I'm going to arrange an audition. And don't worry. I just wanted to see if you were interested, but I hear you're doing really great work. And don't worry if you don't have it memorized." He says that we're just going to go over act one and a couple of scenes and one of the big arias and a duet. And I said, "Okay, but I think I can have it memorized." He says, "No, no, don't worry about it. If you can't get it memorized, do not stress over it. We just want you to be at the audition." And he says, I'll make sure I arrange to get the score for you." So, of course, after that, everybody stopped and looked, and I'm just like, "Oh, wow." And I just went on back on stage, back into rehearsal like nothing ever happened. So that is I will never forget that moment. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's when it's not even you've made it win, but it was really just one of those things that was almost magical. And it just goes to show you that you don't have to, like, it's okay to humble yourself and to just really want to have an authentic reason for doing something. And for me, it was like, I want to sing with this company. I want to know what the dynamics are. And I still want them to know who I am. And it just all worked. And that was just really important for me. And another time was auditioning for the role for the opera singer in House of Cards. And I didn't get the role, but I thought, I went in an audition. It was a great audition and everything like that, but I think it was a singer from California or something that got it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because that was another instance where I humbled myself and I said, I could have been like, "Oh," and just forgotten about it. But I decided I really want to understand what TV is like working in TV. And I decided to give the casting agent a call and I said, I understand. Thank you so much for letting me know, but I'm still interested in if you have anything else. And she said, are you kidding me? Yes. So lo and behold, they create this whole little scene with Kevin Spacey. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And all of that just out of humbling myself and saying, hey, do you have anything else? And so just, yeah, so those are my little moments that make me keep going, put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have a number one booked it moment that you'd like to talk about? Because those two were pretty awesome.
Yeah, okay. So another number one booked it moment. So those two are great. Another one booked it moment was, of course, getting my first international tour
Yeah.
and my first national Broadway tour, and then doing my debut at Carnegie Hall. And that was after deciding to just take a break from touring.
Mm.
And I was really what you talked about earlier, just what am I going to do now that I've decided to stop doing that, but I still feel like sharing music is important for the little kids. And then
Yeah.
being able to get a manager, and then it just ended up growing into this whole Voices of the New Millennium at the time and doing my debut at Carnegie Hall. So, the life of a performing artist, you have these ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys, and the peaks are what make you appreciate the valleys.
Yeah, for sure. And let's take a moment to talk about the present. What projects are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And it's a weird time in this global pandemic. How do you see the entertainment industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
The entertainment industry is really going to have to be pretty dynamic, and they're also going to have to change a lot of things, in my opinion. As the performing arts community and creative arts community has stands to lose over $50 billion just this year, because of the
Wow.
pandemic alone.
Yeah.
Over 75% of musicians and creative artists are currently, even though we're out of work, are currently using our gifts to uplift people for nothing. We do these YouTube concerts, we do anything that will bring in a little bit of income. So we're sitting here using our gifts as usual to lift morale, uplift communities. But yet we're the hardest hit out of all the industries. We are going to be the hardest hit. The other thing is we're going to have to be able to just create your own thing. Like I said, in 2013, I started my production company. I started out just doing a podcast, and then I moved it to TV, and it got a lot of hits. It started really engaging people who were interested in opera, but they had no idea. Like, they were either really afraid to talk to an opera singer, or they just didn't know where to start when it comes to opera, but they wanted to kind of like, I wonder what that's, they sing in
Yeah.
different languages. So anyway, so that's what the show that I did aimed to do. And that's what I still try to do with my podcast. I have a recording label that I started, oh my gosh, back in the 90s, in the 1900s. I started in the 1900s, and it's doing really well. So I always just release my EPs on it, and it just keeps going. And I self release it myself. I produce it myself. The podcast, as you know, doing these things, you end up producing a lot of it yourself. And of course, we've had the pandemic, but we've also had what we touched on earlier, all of this social unrest when it comes to culture and being able to be more inclusive. And I think those are conversations that we're definitely going to have to start having. And it's been very different because this time around, we talked about it before. The world was at this point before, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, with, of course, Freddie Gray. But now that we have this one was different because now it's no longer one group, one population that is saying we're not being heard. Now we have the buy in from others. And I think it really is because kids nowadays have friends who are all different colors. So I think the impact comes in with, wow, I have a friend like, just because of the color of her skin, I couldn't even imagine something like that happening to them,
Right.
which means they talk to their parents, which means their parents are like, wow. It's just so different, I think, with kids being impacted because now all of our circles, like I tell my daughter, if you look in your friendship circle and you only have friends that look like you, then you're doing it wrong. Because in this day and age, you should have friends or acquaintances that are just a lot of different people.
Mm.
And even if you're the same shade, maybe you come from different places in the world, socioeconomic backgrounds. That's important. As long as everybody's on the same page. No slouching. We don't do slouching. As long as we all work and aspire higher. But yeah, I think the industry as a whole is going to have to get a little more creative. There are a lot of things that we can actually start using more technology as far as outreach, as far as engaging more people. The Met offers, I think, every week, which I've been loving. Every week they release a new platform that allows people to, it's one theme. So I think right before the election, they did a whole political opera theme for the week. And before then, it was like scary things. I think it was like Halloween. But they're doing a whole streaming thing. For each week, they come up with a different theme, which I love, which is important because it's like all this technology was here before, but now we're just really starting to use it and to use it for good, which I think is great.
For sure. I totally agree with you on all of those points. And it is time to move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round.
Uh-oh.
I am going to ask you a
Uh-oh.
handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after
Okay.
another. Are you ready?
Okay, I think I'm ready.
All right. First question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
Fear.
Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Never give up.
Third question. What is something that is working for you right now? Or if you'd like to go pre-COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
Doing my own thing, creating my own opportunities.
Yes. Fourth question. What is your best resource? Whether that is a book, a movie, a YouTube video, maybe a podcast or piece of technology you've found is helping your career right now.
Definitely your podcast.
Oh,
And
thank you.
it's true. And also books. I just read a lot of books.
Brilliant. Love reading. And the fifth question. If you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently or would you keep it the same?
Yeah, I would do a couple of things differently. One thing is that I would realize no man is an island. So I do have a habit of isolating myself, which is why, like this whole shutdown thing, I've been like thriving in it. But yeah, that is one thing that I had to really like work on. No man is an island. You can't just think you can do every single thing by yourself because I just can't stand arguing. But yeah, you have to be able to work with people and be able to open yourself up a little bit more. So that's the one thing I do different.
Yes, for sure. And the last question. What is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career in this industry you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Oh, definitely perseverance, definitely self realization, reflection, looking at where you are right now and go from there.
Yes, for sure. Get clear, get some perspective, and then
Yes.
move forward. Yes. And to wrap up this interview, Bree, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
Oh, sure. On social media, Instagram, Bri.Cooper, mezzo soprano. And on Facebook, Bree Cooper, mezzo soprano. You can listen to my EPs on Spotify, Bree Cooper, mezzo soprano, Amazon, Bree Cooper. Take a listen to my podcast, Harbor for the Arts. And it's HARBOUR. Yes, it's an old English spelling. And also my other podcast, which deals more with community engagement, a little bit of politics, which is Cooper and Company, Bree Cooper and Company podcast. And also I have a play that I have been working on, and we're looking to debut it in the fall of 2021, as well as a movie about the opera singer Marian Anderson.
Beautiful. And for everyone listening out there, I have put the links to everything Bree just said into the description of this episode so you can easily connect with her. And be sure to share this podcast with your fellow entertainers, coaches, teachers, and arts and entertainment educators, and anyone you know aspiring to create a career in the entertainment industry. It is integral to helping them succeed and helping you create a better, more fulfilling career in this wild and crazy industry. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Bree, thank you so much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It has been wonderful. I'm so excited for you and your wife and the work that both of you are doing and your family. And I appreciate everything you're doing with your podcast and spreading the word about the performing arts.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't miss an episode. Every guest drops more value and insight than any other resource out there. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a rating and review. Also, be sure to head over to youbookeditpodcast.com and join our free email community where we dig deep into a continually growing resource of truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help you advance your entertainment career. All the best to you.